Hi guys, and sorry for the delay in my coverage of the candidates tournament. I had some technical difficulties with my computer that are now thankfully resolved. So we're going to pick it up in round 11, where Anish Giri, the top Dutch Grandmaster at 2780, had white against Ding Liren, the third highest player in the world and the top Chinese Grandmaster, at 2798. Both of these players are known for being difficult to beat. In 2018, Ding recorded the longest level top unbeaten streak at 100 games until it was broken by Magnus Carlsen in 2020. And Giri is sometimes criticized because his games so often result in draws. He shouldn't be too ashamed of that, as this is a criticism that was also leveled at the Great World Champion Tigran Petrosian, who is often regarded as the hardest player ever to beat and is one of my all-time favorite players. Some players simply have a more prophylactic style of play that is more concerned with what their opponent is trying to do rather than actually trying to do something themselves, and it seems that Giri and Petrosian have that in common, and there was certainly not much bloodshed anticipated in his game against Ding, but apparently the players had other things in mind. So without further ado, let's get the game underway. Giri opened with e4 and Ding responded with e5, and the game went into a Roy Lopez with knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So Ding played a6, which is the Morphy variation, and the game continued with the main line bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, all normal, but now came the somewhat surprising bishop takes c6, and rook e1 is the main line here, and Giri is now taking the game into a sideline and presumably had prepared something in this line. D takes c6 is how Ding continued, and this is overwhelmingly the main move and the main way to capture the piece. B takes c6 instead gives white an edge after knight takes e5, knight takes e4, rook e1, and for example knight c5, d4, knight e6 and c4, where the pressure of this knight on c6 preventing black from moving the d pawn is annoying, and he's getting a lot more space here in the center right away. So d takes c6 is the correct move, and that's what Ding played, and Giri answered with d3 just to solidify his e4 pawn. And it's important to note that if white now tries that line we looked at a second ago, with knight takes e5, then knight takes e4, if rook e1 as before, queen d4 is now possible due to this open d file. This is one of the reasons why d takes c6 better than b takes c6, and if anyone's better here, it's black. So back to the game continuation with d3. And bishop d6 is what Ding played, taking the time to defend this pawn, and this is actually a very uncommon way for black to continue, at least according to my opening book. The most popular moves by far is knight d7 to defend the pawn, and queen d6 and bishop g4 are also given. So knight bd2, Giri continues development, and so did Ding with bishop e6. And with knight b3, this is the first novelty of the game. So this is now a brand new position that hasn't been seen at any reasonably high level of chess that's been recorded in the past. So Ding now played queen e7, and one of the reasons behind this is because with knight b3, one of the ideas is knight a5, which Giri played now, attacking the b7 pawn, and it can't move or c6 is falling. So one of the reasons of queen e7 is so that black can castle long and defend the pawn with his king, and not have to tie down one of his pieces with defending the b7 pawn. So of course this is a very double-edged decision, because with the opposite sides castling, it can lead to very crazy positions with both sides pawn storming their opponent's king. White's going to throw up these pawns and black's going to throw down these pawns. And in such positions, it's usually very important to not have weakened your king's pawns, which Giri hasn't done, but Ding has with a6, and he's got these double pawns too. But despite that, the engine gives the position as equal here. Black has the bishop pair as compensation for his doubled pawns, and neither side can make immediate threats just yet in the position. So for now it's a very even position, and Giri has to come up with a plan for the middle game. So white would like to expand on the queen side and have options, like playing c3, d4, b4, those kind of moves, but he has to defend his e4 pawn before he can do that. And the queen here on d1 is also facing the rook, which means there is a slight risk for tactics later on, so it makes sense from a tactical point of view to do something about that. And with those things in mind, Giri played queen e2 now. Ding pinned the knight with bishop g4, and he's hoping perhaps to provoke h3, after which black can aim to pawn storm more effectively once white has weakened his king side like this. And Giri didn't take the bait, and he continued with c3. So as I mentioned, his idea is to play d4 or b4 and just expand. So Ding now took a move to hinder both of those options with c5. So it's a nice prophylactic move. And it means that Giri has to spend another move preparing his expansion with a3. And here Ding made a somewhat questionable move with c6, and this has the benefit that it blocks white from playing immediately b4, b5 to start opening lines, but it does further weaken the king position, and it means that after Giri plays b4, he will now be threatening b takes c5 and rook b1, where the knight and the rook are combining nicely on these pawns. If b6 over and knight takes c6 is winning a pawn and the exchange. So it's a risky move to play. He does have the dark squares covered with his bishop for the moment, but as I was saying earlier, you really don't want to start weakening your king side pawns in opposite sides castling games. But obviously Ding is a grandmaster and I'm not, so I'm sure he's comfortable with doing that. So anyway, to get back on with the game, Giri did continue with b4. So then we have bishop c7, and this is one of the advantages of playing c6. It's a nice prophylactic move again. It prevents b takes c5 or b4 because the knight is just going to fall. So Giri played knight b3 because he wants to increase the pressure on c5, and this makes a lot of sense, although knight c4 is also an interesting way to continue. So Ding now played knight d7, which overprotects e5 and also protects c5, which is becoming a critical point of the position. And another advantage of playing this knight d7 is that he wants to play f5 later and try and open up some lines here on the king side and create some play himself. And of course black doesn't want to take on b4, or it's going to open up lines for white to the black king, so he absolutely has to avoid that exchange. And he's happy instead simply to maintain this tension. A lot of the time in amateur or club games, people take just because they can take, and they're reluctant to maintain the tension. But in high level games, it's a lot more common to maintain the tension in the position. So h3, and Giri puts the question to the bishop, and Ding elected to maintain the pin, which might come in useful later if he's able to play f5 and f takes e4 and then move a rook to the f file, and yeah, this is going to be annoying to deal with. So bishop h5, he maintained the pin, and now bishop e3, increasing the pressure on c5, and this is now absolutely critical. He has to do something about it, or it's just going to fall. And Ding still didn't want to take on b4 and open up the lines, and b6 is just not a feasible option. It's too weakening. For example, white can play d4 right away with a discovered attack with check, and amongst just a very bad weakening move for the c6 and a6 And so yeah, it's just not a feasible option, so he must instead look for counterplay, and that's what he did with f5. So he's just giving up this pawn. And bishop takes c5 is what Giri played, and this is the right move. If he takes with the knight instead, then he's running into f4. We can see that quickly. Knight takes c5, then f4, and this is one of the advantages of playing f5. So for example, bishop d2, knight takes c5, b takes c5, queen takes c5, and black has a slight edge here. So bishop takes c5 is the right move, and now queen f7. So playing f5 has also freed up this square for the queen, and this move is with tempo because it attacks the loose knight on b3. So rook a, b1, and now g5. Very nice sharp play from Ding, and he of course wants to open lines on the white king, and g4 is now a significant threat to deal with. So e takes f5 from Giri, and this capture makes g4 a lot less effective, but Ding played it regardlessly, and this might actually be a small mistake. The engine prefers queen takes f5 here with an equal position after queen e4 next. And note that white does not want to try and win a piece with g4 instead, because bishop takes g4 simply, h takes g4, queen takes g4, and this is going to be winning for black after king h1 and e4. For example, queen takes e4, now queen h3 check, king g1, rook h e8 is deflecting the queen from the defense of the knight, but that's the least of white's worries. The engine wants to give up the queen here in order to stay alive, but white is busted in any case. If he tries to save the queen, for example with queen c4, then simply g4 is going to be a winning attack. The knight can't move, or its mate, and g takes f3 is coming, and rook g8 and queen h2 and so on. It's just overwhelming for white to deal with. So it's a good example of why you shouldn't weaken your king position in opposite castling games. Okay, so back to the game. g4 is what Ding has just played, and Giri answered with knight g5. A nice move. It's the only way for white to stay ahead in the position, because pushing this pawn means the knight's no longer pinned, so now he can move it with tempo. So queen takes f5. Ding responds with tempo, attacking the knight, and he wanted to keep the queens and some chance of attack alive, and white is slightly better now. A better continuation was g takes h3, allowing the queens to come off. Knight f7, bishop e2, knight d8, rook d8, and for example bishop e7, rook g8, g3, bishop d3, f6, bishop takes b1, now rook takes b1, and white has a smaller edge here than he has in the game continuation, but with opposite sides castling, you want to keep queens on the board, you want to play for mate, so that's what Ding is going for with queen takes f5. So h4, again the best move from Giri, and Ding continued with b6, and this is actually a small error that weakens his king even more. Better was rook h g8 and active play in the center after, for example, a4, e4, nice pawn sack to open line. So queen takes e4, now queen e5, threatening mate. So queen e5 and now knight e5, where black has reasonable compensation for the 2 pawns. And that's an engine line. That's obviously a human player would rather keep queens on the board. So b6, and now knight e4, a very sharp move from Giri. He's giving up a piece here in order to open lines to the black king, and this is a fine way to continue, although bishop e3 was probably slightly better objectively. So knight e4 and b takes c5. Ding accepts the challenge. So b takes c5 is the best move, and Giri has a pawn for the piece right away, as well as open b file, which can become really, really dangerous in a lot of variations, as we'll see. And he's got very active pieces and the initiative, and white now has the monster threat knight a5, which is threatening knight takes c6 and knight a7 mate if black does nothing about it. And after knight a5 there's no bishop takes a5 because of knight d6 check. Is winning the queen, but it doesn't actually matter. He doesn't have to take the queen because king c7 is going to be the only move, and then rook b7 will be mate. So black has to make room for his king here, and that's what Ding did with knight f6. And this is also threatening g3 with counterplay, and he can't play that a move earlier because white can answer with queen b2, which is just going to be crushing. We can see that now. If g3, then queen b2, and this is threatening knight d4, attacking the queen and threatening mate on b7, and this is actually too much for black to deal with. For example, rook df8 is the best defense. It means knight d4 no longer wins, but now again knight a5 threatening queen b7, and also knight takes c6. And black has to give up his queen here for the best chance to survive. So bishop takes a5. Now knight d6 check, king d8, knight f5, rook f5, and white simply winning after f takes g3. So knight f6 is what Ding did play. And then we had knight d6 check. It's a great move, and Giri's finding all the best moves and playing very well. So this forces bishop takes d6, so c takes d6, and black might as well take the pawn. There's not much better to do in the position, so rook takes d6, and now Giri's idea becomes apparent. d4, threatening queen takes a6 check with a huge attack, as well as simply d takes e5, winning the piece back. And Ding now blundered with c5. Presumably he felt defending a6 was the most important thing to do here, and actually it's very hard to defend his position. Perhaps better was king d8, just evacuating his king, but white can then try knight a5 with the huge threat of rook b8 check and winning the rook, as well as knight b7 check, winning the exchange. So play might continue rook e8, and now queen takes a6, king e7, d e5, queen e5, rook fe1, knight e4, knight takes c6 check, rook takes c6, queen takes c6, king f8, and white retains a winning advantage, but black can at least try to play on for a while here. But Ding missed that defense anyway, and he played c5. So knight takes c5. Giri again finds the best move. If instead d takes e5 to try and win a piece, then suddenly g3, and the advantage swings to black. This attacks the queen, and queen b2 is best, but now comes g takes f2 check, rook takes f2, and the shocker, queen takes b1 check, queen takes b1, rook d1 check, queen d1, bishop d1, attacking the knight. So knight c5, but after knight g4, attacking the rook, and black is going into a promising endgame. So perhaps Ding was hoping for this, and it was well played by Giri not to fall at this last hurdle. So knight takes c5 is what he played. So the next move was rook e8, just pinning the pawn here. Oh, sorry, not pinning the pawn, but preventing the loss of the piece. But this was in fact a blunder. Better was e takes d4, and after cd4, rook e8. But now again comes queen b2, threatening mate on b8. So knight d7, and now rook fc1 is just crushing, and these open lines are completely winning for white. but Ding missed that and he played rook e8. So Giri now found queen c4, and it's again the best move. He played a very, very strong game this game, and in fact this time it was a strong enough move that Ding resigned after 29 moves, and this continuation is one of the reasons why moving his pawn to c5 a few moves earlier wasn't a good idea, because it opens more lines to the black king, and white can now exploit that. So despite being a piece down, Giri is of course now completely winning, and the black pieces on the king's side are merely spectators to the demise of their king. White is threatening knight e6 check and mate in 2, and there's no satisfactory defense. For example, king d8 is probably best, but now comes knight b7 check, king e7, now knight takes d6, wins the exchange, and black's best hope is to not recapture, but to play queen e6 here. If instead king takes d6, then rook b7, threatening queen c5 check, and queen c6 mate is winning easily. So yeah, queen e6 is a better way to try to defend, but then queen c7 check, king f8, and now simply knight takes e8, bishop e8, d e5, knight d7, rook f d1, and this is actually forcing mate, albeit in 15 moves, so black is lost in any case. And it was a great game and a great win, and Giri showed that he can dominate world-class players in tactical struggles just as well as he can play calm, prophylactic positional games that often lead to draws. So it would be great if we could see more games from him like this in the future, as he is a huge talent and he's certainly underappreciated due to his drawish tendencies. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit those like and subscribe buttons if you did, and I'll see you next time.